Before this day was over, a locksmith would be standing on a stranger's porch, a sealed envelope would end a marriage's illusion of comfort, and a woman everyone had learned to overlook would become the one holding all the power. But at 2 p.m. that afternoon, Sarah Mitchell didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was the sting spreading across her cheek, and the silence of a backyard full of people who loved her, watching and doing nothing. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why the quietest person in the family is sometimes the one you should never underestimate. The barbecue smelled like charcoal and fresh-cut grass. Kids darted between lawn chairs. Someone's playlist hummed low from a speaker on the porch rail. It was, by every appearance, an ordinary Sunday. Then it wasn't. Ryan Cole's hand cracked across Sarah's face before the paper plate in her hand even hit the ground. For one full second, the entire yard went silent. The grill hissed behind them. Lemonade spilled across the patio stones and soaked into Sarah's sandals. Ryan stepped closer, jaw tight, pointing a finger inches from her face. "Don't you ever touch me again." Sarah pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. "I didn't. Clean this mess," he snapped, gesturing at the shattered cups on the ground. "And get out." Everyone had seen it. Her cousins, her aunt, her own sister. And not one person moved. Here's the part that should make your stomach turn, the part nobody expects. It wasn't a stranger who walked over next. It was Jessica, Sarah's own sister. And she didn't walk towards Sarah to check on her face. She walked over and stood beside Ryan, like he was the one who'd been wronged. "Apologize to him," Jessica said. Sarah stared at her sister in disbelief. "Jessica, he slapped me." Jessica's eyes hardened. "Apologize. Or leave." Before this day was over, a locksmith would be standing on a stranger's porch, a sealed envelope would end a marriage's illusion of comfort, and a woman everyone had learned to overlook would become the one holding all the power. But at 2 p.m. that afternoon, Sarah Mitchell didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was the sting spreading across her cheek, and the silence of a backyard full of people who loved her, watching and doing nothing. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why the quietest person in the family is sometimes the one you should never underestimate. The barbecue smelled like charcoal and fresh-cut grass. Kids darted between lawn chairs. Someone's playlist hummed low from a speaker on the porch rail. It was, by every appearance, an ordinary Sunday. Then it wasn't. Ryan Cole's hand cracked across Sarah's face before the paper plate in her hand even hit the ground. For one full second, the entire yard went silent. The grill hissed behind them. Lemonade spilled across the patio stones and soaked into Sarah's sandals. Ryan stepped closer, jaw tight, pointing a finger inches from her face. "Don't you ever touch me again." Sarah pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. "I didn't. Clean this mess," he snapped, gesturing at the shattered cups on the ground. "And get out." Everyone had seen it. Her cousins, her aunt, her own sister. And not one person moved. Here's the part that should make your stomach turn, the part nobody expects. It wasn't a stranger who walked over next. It was Jessica, Sarah's own sister. And she didn't walk towards Sarah to check on her face. She walked over and stood beside Ryan, like he was the one who'd been wronged. "Apologize to him," Jessica said. Sarah stared at her sister in disbelief. "Jessica, he slapped me." Jessica's eyes hardened. "Apologize. Or leave." Sarah looked around at the barbecue she had spent that entire morning setting up. The folding table she'd hauled from her garage, the trays of food she'd cooked, the decorations she'd bought out of her own pocket because Jessica had said money was tight again. Her throat tightened. But when she spoke, her voice came out steady. "No." A few relatives looked down at their shoes. Someone quietly picked up a fallen cup, just to have something to do with their hands. Ryan let out a short, satisfied laugh, like her refusal had proven some point only he understood. Jessica stepped aside and pointed toward the gate. "Then leave." And just like that, the sister who used to call her my favorite little sister was pointing her toward the exit, over a man who had just struck her in front of an entire family. If you think that was the worst part of Sarah's day, you have no idea what was still coming. Because 300 miles away, inside a law office she hadn't thought about in weeks, a phone call was about to change everything. Sarah's cheek burned the whole walk to her car. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Behind her, she heard Ryan mutter to whoever was listening. Always playing innocent. Nobody followed her out. At her car, fumbling for her keys, her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A notification lit up the screen. Hastings and Price Estate Attorneys, urgent call requested. She barely registered it through the tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, the barbecue slowly came back to life. Chairs scraped against the patio. Someone forced a laugh. Ryan's voice rose above the rest, calm now, confident again, like nothing had happened at all. Sarah sat behind the wheel, staring at the house where her own sister had just chosen a man's pride over her bleeding cheek. And she had absolutely no idea that, within hours, Ryan and Jessica would come home to find something waiting on their front porch that would make every single person who'd stayed silent today regret it. Let that sink in for a second, because what happens next isn't revenge. It's something Sarah didn't even plan. It had been set in motion months before this barbecue ever happened, by someone who saw exactly who Sarah was long before anyone else did. Sarah drove home in silence. No radio. Just the hum of the engine and the occasional glimpse of the red mark on her cheek in the rearview mirror at every stoplight. I didn't even do anything, she whispered to no one. By the time she reached her small townhouse, the anger had drained into something heavier: exhaustion. The kind that lives in your bones. She dropped her keys on the counter and leaned against it, staring at a photo on the shelf. Her, Jessica, and their grandfather laughing in his garden years ago. Back then, Jessica used to sling an arm around her shoulder and call her my favorite little sister. So much for that, Sarah murmured, sinking into a chair. And then the memories came, not because she wanted them to, but because they refused to stay buried. When Jessica went back to work after her first baby, Sarah had watched that child almost every single afternoon for nearly a year, never once asking for a dime. When Ryan lost his job for months, Sarah quietly paid 2 of their overdue utility bills after Jessica called her crying. No one can know, Jessica had begged. They won't, Sarah had promised, and kept that promise so well that Jessica never brought it up again. Every holiday, every birthday, every family reunion, Sarah was the one who showed up early to hang decorations, the one who drove across town for forgotten desserts, the one who canceled her own plans without hesitation when their grandfather needed a ride to the doctor. She had become the family member everyone leaned on. And somehow the easiest one to overlook. And Ryan's cruelty? It hadn't started today. It had been simmering for years, small comments, tiny cuts disguised as jokes. You're still single. You work too much. You always try too hard. Every time Sarah spoke up at dinner, Ryan found a way to talk over her. And every time Jessica just laughed it off. Oh, that's just Ryan. You know how he is. Over time, his disrespect became normal, not because it was ever okay, but because nobody wanted the headache of standing up to him. Sarah remembered one gathering almost a year earlier, when she'd accidentally parked in his spot. Ryan had walked in carrying his cooler and announced, loud enough for the whole house to hear, "Guess some people still don't understand basic manners." Everyone laughed. Sarah quietly moved her car. Nobody told him he was being ridiculous. She had convinced herself that keeping the peace was worth swallowing her pride. Today proved once and for all exactly how wrong she'd been. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time. This time she picked it up. One new voicemail. "Good afternoon, Miss Mitchell. This is Michael Hastings from Hastings and Price Estate Attorneys. Please return my call as soon as possible regarding the occupancy agreement connected to your grandfather's estate. This matter requires your immediate attention." Sarah frowned. She'd been hoping she wouldn't have to think about any of that today. Not after what had just happened. But something inside her had shifted. Not just because of the slap. Because of Jessica. Because her own sister had looked her dead in the eyes and chosen humiliation over the truth. She pressed call. The attorney picked up almost instantly. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for calling. I'm sorry it comes at such a difficult time." A pause. "Has something happened?" Sarah let out a slow breath. And for the first time all day, she told someone exactly what had happened. His tone grew careful. "I see. When your grandfather's estate was finalized, the occupancy agreement protecting your sister and her husband included specific conditions. One of them addressed harassment, intimidation, or abusive conduct directed toward you." Sarah closed her eyes. "If those conditions were ever violated," he continued, You are under no obligation to continue allowing them to occupy the property. Silence. He didn't rush her. Finally, Sarah asked the only question that mattered. If I decide today, can everything be done legally? Yes, he answered, without a moment's hesitation. Another long pause. Sarah looked once more at the mark still burning on her cheek. Please move forward. I'll begin immediately. The call ended. Sarah set the phone down slowly. For the first time all day, she wasn't running from the conflict anymore. She had made a decision, and it could never be undone. You'll want to remember that line, because what happens in the next 20 minutes is the moment this entire story flips upside down. Back at the barbecue, the burgers kept sizzling. Kids kept chasing each other across the lawn like nothing had happened. Only the adults seemed uneasy. Ryan stood by the cooler, soda in hand, laughing loudly. I'm telling you, he said, shaking his head. She's always been dramatic. She barely brushed me and acted like I was the problem. A couple of cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nobody spoke. Some people need to learn boundaries, Ryan went on. She did this to herself. Jessica nodded beside him. Exactly. She could have just apologized. She's too stubborn. That's when Aunt Diane finally folded her arms and spoke. Ryan, she said carefully, I watched what happened. So did everyone else. You slapped her. Ryan shrugged it off. She was carrying drinks. Someone bumped into her. I saw enough, Diane said flatly. Jessica stepped in before her aunt could push further. My husband doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Diane looked her niece dead in the eyes. Your sister walked out of here with a handprint on her face. And she could have avoided all of this by apologizing, Jessica shot back. Several relatives looked away, not wanting another argument. Ryan smirked, satisfied. See? Even Jessica understands. But across the yard, whispers had already begun. I've never seen him hit anyone before. That wasn't self-defense. Sarah didn't deserve that. A few cousins quietly pulled out their phones. One texted Sarah. Are you okay? Another. I'm sorry nobody stopped him. An older uncle muttered to his wife. We should have said something. She just nodded. We should have. For the first time all afternoon, Ryan noticed the mood shifting. People weren't laughing with him anymore. They were just waiting for the day to be over. An hour later, the guests began packing up. Polite goodbyes, but none of the usual warmth. Ryan noticed that too. What's everybody so quiet about? Nobody answered. Jessica forced a smile. They're just tired. Ryan believed her completely. As they loaded coolers into the SUV, he smirked. I guarantee Sarah calls tomorrow pretending none of this happened. Jessica sighed. She always comes around. Exactly, Ryan said, slamming the tailgate shut. People like her never stay mad. They climbed in and drove home, absolutely certain the day had ended exactly the way Ryan wanted. They had no idea what was parked outside their house. 20 minutes later, Ryan turned onto their street and slowed the SUV. What's going on? Jessica leaned forward. A white sedan sat parked in front of their house. Behind it, another unfamiliar vehicle. Standing near the front walkway were three people. A man in a tailored navy suit holding a leather briefcase, a uniformed locksmith with a toolbox at his feet, and a courier holding a large sealed envelope. Jessica frowned. Are they at the wrong house? Ryan laughed. They must be. He parked in the driveway and climbed out, all confidence. Can I help you? The man in the suit smiled politely and extended a business card. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Hastings. I'm an attorney representing the owner of this property. Ryan's smile faltered. The owner? Yes. Jessica stepped closer, confused. There has to be some mistake. Before we proceed, Hastings said evenly, may I confirm your identities? Ryan folded his arms. I'm Ryan Cole. This is my wife, Jessica Cole. Hastings nodded once, accepted the sealed envelope from the courier, and handed it directly to Ryan. Ryan looked down. His expression changed instantly. Right there, across the very first page, Sarah's name. His confident smile was gone. What is this? Hastings met his eyes without raising his voice. Before you enter this house, you need to read page 1. Ryan tore the envelope open with impatient hands. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Some kind of clerical error." Jessica leaned in, trying to read over his shoulder. The attorney said nothing, just watched. Ryan's eyes stopped moving halfway down the page. The color drained from his face. Jessica snatched the papers from his hands. The very first paragraph read, "The legal owner of the property is Sarah Elaine Mitchell, pursuant to the final probate order and recorded deed executed following the estate of Harold Mitchell." Jessica stared at the words. "No." She flipped the page. "No, this can't be right." "There is no mistake," Hastings said quietly. Ryan looked up, anger rising. "My wife inherited this house from her grandfather." "No," Hastings replied. "Your grandfather transferred ownership to Miss Sarah Mitchell. The deed was properly recorded several months ago." "That's impossible." "It's fully documented." Hastings opened his briefcase and laid out certified copies, one at a time. The recorded deed, the probate order, and the occupancy agreement, signed after the transfer. Jessica recognized her grandfather's signature immediately. So did Ryan. Neither of them could deny it. Jessica's breathing turned uneven. "I remember." A memory rushed back, months earlier, when their grandfather had asked Sarah specifically to drive him to several appointments. Ryan had joked about it at the time. "There goes Grandpa's favorite." Sarah had just smiled and said nothing. Another memory surfaced. Their grandfather once asking everyone to leave the room except Sarah during a family gathering. Jessica had assumed it was just medical paperwork. She'd never asked another question. Now every small, easily dismissed moment suddenly made perfect sense. Sarah hadn't been hiding anything out of spite. She had simply respected her grandfather's privacy. Ryan slammed the papers shut. "I don't care whose name is on a piece of paper. We live here. We've lived here for years. You can't just throw people out like this." "Ordinarily," Hastings said, "occupancy agreements remain in effect until their stated expiration." Ryan smirked. "There you go." "But," Hastings continued, "this agreement contains several conditions." He turned to a highlighted section. "Condition 7. Jessica read it aloud, her voice trembling. "Occupancy shall immediately terminate in the event of verified harassment, intimidation, physical violence, or abusive conduct directed towards Sarah Mitchell." She stopped reading. Ryan grabbed the papers back. "This doesn't prove anything." "It does," Hastings said calmly, "when supported by evidence." "What evidence?" "The incident that occurred earlier today." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You weren't there." "No," Hastings said, "but numerous witnesses were." He took one step toward the porch. Before he could reach it, the locksmith quietly stepped forward, inserted a new cylinder into the front door, and began replacing the lock. The metallic click echoed through the still evening air. Ryan stopped where he stood. For the first time all day, he had absolutely nothing left to say. Ryan stood frozen on the walkway, staring at the door like refusing to blink might somehow change what was happening. "It doesn't matter," he finally snapped. "Sarah can't just decide to ruin our lives over one argument." Hastings closed his briefcase calmly. "This decision wasn't made because of one argument. It was made because the agreement your grandfather-in-law created anticipated exactly this kind of behavior." Jessica lifted her head. "What do you mean?" Hastings pulled out one final folder. "Your grandfather asked our firm to explain the reasoning behind this agreement, but only if it ever had to be enforced." He opened it. "Mr. Harold Mitchell believed Sarah would eventually inherit this property because she consistently cared for him in the final years of his life without ever asking for anything in return." Jessica looked down at her hands. "She drove him to every medical appointment," Hastings continued. "She managed his medications. She handled repairs around the house. She spent holidays with him when everyone else claimed to be too busy." Ryan said nothing. "Your grandfather also wanted both of you to have time to become financially stable," Hastings added. "That's why he created a temporary occupancy agreement, instead of requiring you to move out immediately." Jessica's voice trembled. He was trying to help us." "Yes, but he included one condition he considered non-negotiable." Hastings looked directly at Ryan. "He told us he'd witnessed your temper more than once. He specifically instructed us. If Sarah were ever threatened, intimidated, or physically harmed by either occupant, the agreement would end immediately. Jessica covered her mouth. So, Grandpa expected this. He hoped it would never happen, Hastings said quietly. But he prepared for the possibility anyway. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Ryan's shoulders dropped. All the confidence he'd carried through the entire afternoon was simply gone. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked defeated. I never thought she'd actually do this, he muttered. Hastings corrected him gently but firmly. She didn't. You did. You chose your actions this afternoon. Miss Mitchell simply exercised the legal right she already had. Those words settled over the driveway like a verdict. Ryan had spent years believing there would never be real consequences. Today proved once and for all exactly how wrong he'd been. Jessica wiped her tears. I need to talk to Sarah. That decision is entirely hers, Hastings said. With shaking hands, Jessica pulled out her phone and stared at her sister's name for almost a full minute before pressing call. It rang, then went to voicemail. She swallowed hard. Sarah. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I should have stood beside you. I should have stopped him. I kept choosing peace with my husband instead of doing what was right. She paused, fighting back tears. You deserved a sister today. I wasn't one. She ended the message without expecting a reply. Deep down, she already knew. No apology could undo what had happened. Over the following week, Ryan and Jessica packed up their belongings within the timeline the legal notice required. No dramatic confrontations. No courtroom battles. Everything unfolded exactly as the agreement demanded. Word spread through the family fast. Relatives who had watched the barbecue in silence started calling Sarah, one after another. Aunt Diane apologized for not speaking up sooner. Uncle Frank admitted he'd stayed quiet to avoid conflict, and regretted it. Several cousins confessed they'd always felt uneasy around Ryan, but had never had the courage to challenge him. Sarah accepted every apology politely. She didn't lecture anyone. She simply thanked the ones who finally chose honesty, even if it came late. As for Ryan, invitations to family gatherings became noticeably rare. People stopped laughing at his sharp little comments. The image of him striking Sarah in front of everyone had permanently changed how the family saw him. The authority he'd once carried without question was gone, not because Sarah sought revenge, but because the truth had simply, finally, caught up with him. A month later, Sarah unlocked the front door of the house her grandfather had entrusted to her. She didn't rush to erase the past. She honored it instead. She repaired the worn porch railing he'd always meant to fix. She planted fresh flowers in the garden bed where he used to spend his mornings. Inside, she repainted the walls in the warm colors he had once talked about choosing but never got around to. For the first time, the house felt peaceful, not because it was empty, but because it was finally free of fear. Sarah also stopped saying yes to every request that came her way. She no longer believed that earning love meant sacrificing her own dignity. If someone respected her, she gladly showed up for them. If they didn't, she walked away, without an ounce of guilt. By the end of summer, Sarah invited a small group of relatives back to a barbecue, in that very same backyard. This gathering looked nothing like the one she'd walked away from weeks earlier. People laughed without mocking anyone. Children ran barefoot through the grass. Conversations felt easy. Respect had replaced tension in every corner of that yard. As the sun dipped low, Aunt Diane handed Sarah a plate of grilled vegetables and smiled. Your grandfather would have been proud. Sarah looked around, at the flowers, at the family members who had finally chosen kindness, at the home her grandfather had trusted her to protect. And she smiled quietly. Walking away from that first barbecue hadn't been the moment she lost her family. It had been the moment she finally stopped accepting a version of family that demanded her silence. And in choosing her own self-respect, she gained the peaceful life her grandfather had always hoped she would have.